You're listening to the Oh My God podcast. Here, we talk about all things godly, all things womanly, and nothing is off limits. I am Zelda Lebovitz, your host, and together with my special guest, we will begin to uncover and discover what it really means to be a Jewish woman today. See you inside. You look amazing. So, Rachel, welcome to the Oh My God podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Such an honor. I'm so happy and I'm so excited for everyone for the treat they're about to get and for this journey that we're going on. I heard about you like years ago. Like we were chit-chatting on Instagram.
Yeah, I straight up stalked her.
We were like, you were in my world of like Instagram where things would pop up.
You saw me before?
No, I don't know about before, but I'm saying the past couple of years,
yes.
I definitely heard about you and saw your work. And I guess you messaged me first. I don't remember exactly how it started, but most recently you came to us, to me and my friends. We hosted a little breathwork experience, and I just felt so called to have you facilitate that, to help us go on this journey of breathwork. I've done breathwork once before. It was also a very powerful experience, so different. It was a one-on-one between me and this man who helped me go through this breathwork, my first time ever. It was a very, very like psychedelic experience. It was actually Erev Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was very powerful. And that was like my beginning of like this experience. And then I don't even know why I just felt so called to have you come. And it was literally in this space, in this living room.
Good energy here.
Yeah, it really was. And it was just so magical and powerful what you led us to, what you led me to. And after that experience, I just felt like I really want you to come on the podcast, and I want you to I want us to have a conversation about what you do, who you are. Soon I'm going on a retreat of yours, the womb retreat. And it just like opened a whole new world, even though I've been on this healing, self-development, self-growth space for quite a lot of years. But definitely something new unlocked with that experience of breathwork. And I'm like, I gotta just be in your space. What you facilitate and what you create, it's even hard. It's hard to explain in words. It's like such an experience, but we'll try in this conversation. So on Instagram, you go by the Magnetic Mother. Yeah. Can you take us a little bit back to where this started for you?
Well, where it started, in my mother's womb.
Good one.
So, I mean, in terms of the handle Magnetic Mother, I have always had a really strong connection to the moon. So I actually grew up really unconventionally. I didn't grow up in the Jewish community, and we were what you could call like unschooled, but not in like the cool hipster form.
Right.
It was, I'm one of 13 kids.
Wow.
And so we were kind of like our own compound of a community. And when I was a child, I think something that I've noticed now raising my kids in a more modern Jewish community, not necessarily, but in a how Jews are raising their kids now, I see that there's not as much time. I think that that's something that's really missing in the world at large, but something that I can witness as being a mother is that there's not so much space and time just to be bored, just to connect with nature. Children are kind of like busy all the time. And I think that that's something that really stands out when I was thinking about my handle for the Magnetic Mother is I think I had time and time for me to be in the woods.
As a child, you mean?
As a child, I had time where I was just communicating with the moon. I have many memories of staring at the moon and just having a conversation with her. And that is really what spurred my deep love for astrology,
Wow.
which I was always a self-proclaimed astrology nerd.
Wow.
I love the planets, and I loved the interaction between the Earth and the rest of what's out there. So I think when I created the Magnetic Mother, I was in a really interesting place in my life where I had started working as a somatic therapist. I was working with women's bodies, and I felt a deep connection to the magnetism of women. And many different times it's referenced that the Jewish people are like the moon and that women represent the moon. And there's something transfixing to the moon. There's something magnetic about the moon. And it was at a time in my life where I had become a mother. And being a mother, I don't know, especially, my eldest is 14. I don't know if 14 years ago being a mother was necessarily a cool thing. Especially in the place that I was, it was once you have a child, it's kind of like your life is over.
Right.
So the Magnetic Mother came from a place of seeing a lot of relationships evolve, a lot of mothers become mothers and rejecting their motherhood. Whether it's they didn't feel like they had any time anymore, whether they felt that disconnected from who they were before. And it was kind of like a stance on being a matriarch is really powerful. And being a matriarch doesn't mean that your life is necessarily over or that it's uncool or you have to wear like mom skirts and you can't be an interesting person or you can't, when we think of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, we're not thinking of meek people. We're not thinking of, people who are just slaving away somewhere. We're thinking of strong women who were the founders of the Jewish people, who kept the Jewish people. And if you think of mothers at large, mothers are the ones that kept us going generation after generation. Modern science is constantly changing. Modern medicine is constantly changing. How long ago was it where they were giving mercury, as a healing balm, or, using lead or leeches, all sorts of lobotomies,
Right.
taking out pieces of your brain. But it was mothers that stood up and said, this is the continuation of our people, our lineage. And so it was really a proclamation of just, I feel that women have a power that's unbeknownst to most at large. And that's really how the Magnetic Mother came about.
Wow, I love that. Absolutely amazing. And I think in some ways we're all like, if we're listening to our truth and our source, we're all kind of a magnet that's getting connected closer to our truth.
Yeah.
And to our purpose. So I like that. I like that whole idea of
but it's not even so much
magnetic.
of a closer. It's more like us just being in our authenticity, us being. And I think, I could ask you, like, how often do you feel like women are celebrated for being?
Right.
For standing in their sovereignty, for standing in their femininity, for standing in the power of the womb. And when I did my first womb awakening retreat, I think it was like 6 years ago. I have no span of time anymore. But I remember the word womb triggered people so much. Like I got so much flack for the word womb. Like, why don't you call it something else? Like, why do you have to use the word womb? And it was really interesting for me because I was like, what's wrong with the word womb? Like if men had a womb, there would be billboards.
Right.
Talking about how amazing the womb is.
And what was triggering for them, you think?
You know what? The world is changing very quickly. You could feel the frequency in the air. Things are moving very quickly, and I think there's something that we've seen a real shift of a reclamation of the womb. Women trying to find their divine feminine, trying to reclaim that. But I would even say 2 years ago, that wasn't there. Even 2 years ago, it was a very it offended people, I think. I think thinking that blood, like when we hear about blood and birth, people don't want to see it.
Yeah.
They want to make like it doesn't exist.
Right.
And I know that's very wrapped up in how I grew up. Is I had 9 brothers, and my father was born in 1942. So he was, of a different generation.
Wow.
I'm one of the youngest, and I grew up with phrases such as, something that bleeds for 7 days and doesn't die must be a demon, or things like that. Yeah. I very chauvinistic kind of attitude. And I think that was the predominant attitude for a very long time.
So your mother wasn't like the strong matriarch?
So my mother was a very strong woman. But my father had rule, basically. And there, you know what,
Which was very common at the time.
Yeah, very common.
Yeah.
But my mother was a strong Irish woman. But that was very common for Irish women, you know, for generations to kind of be strong people, but at the end of the day, you know, it's just generations of abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, wow, there's so much to unpack here.
Yeah, I'm like thinking which avenue we're going down.
Wow. It's incredible. And also, I think even just the world at large is still very male dominant. And women are slowly finding their power. You know, I mean, I was definitely, even as a woman, I was operating in my masculine. I still am operating in my masculine for so much of the time.
It takes years to decondition.
Yeah, so much of the time. So I think my breathwork experience with you was like the beginning of, and again, this is someone that feels like I have been healing and growing.
Yes.
And still was the beginning. My breathwork experience with you was the beginning of tapping in, like soft, like just tapping into the power of my womb and the power of my femininity, and it unlocked and unleashed so much.
You won't have words, because like you said, what happened in the Beis Hamikdash, you know, wasn't meant to be out there and something we could conceptualize, and that's because the divine feminine is actually the mystery. It's not meant to, just like if you read Rabbi Nachman's work, he talks about how the written Torah is considered masculine. The oral Torah was actually considered feminine, and it was never meant to be written down. It was only written down out of necessity.
Right.
Why? Because women, we wax and we wane.
Wow.
We are the mystery. We are the wonder. We are the process.
Right.
We are not something that's a goal-orientated structure. And within us, we have the masculine and the feminine. But right now, we're living in a place where the feminine has become either distorted, which we see, you know, with the movement of feminism. You know, I'm sure there's wonderful pieces to that, but you can see there's, you know, when you try to contain something, it eventually oozes out and explodes. And that explosion, you know, can become distorted. But the true divine feminine is meant to be a mystery. It's not meant to be where we have answers, cold, hard facts, where we have you know, a linear way of thinking, a cerebral way of thinking. It's supposed to be intuitive. And you need logic, but you also need intuition, and they work together.
Yeah.
But right now we're working in a place where it's all about logic, it's all about goals, it's all about facts and making sense. But that's where, like I was telling you with the children, we're really missing a piece of wonder, a piece of time and space. And I always say with healing the body, what are you going to do in a session? Tell me what's next, what's next, what's next. So much of what happens in a session when we're working with the body is we're just creating, I'm not a healer. I am a conduit. You are your healer. Your body is divinely intelligent. And when we create the appropriate space and we create time, that's when the body will just do what it has to do and do what we call in the body working world an unwinding. And we just need to follow the body. We need to create safety for the body, protection, and we need to, at sometimes, guide. But for the most part, it's really getting out of the way, and it's allowing you to get out of the way so that we can create that time and space so that you can unwind and allow that healing process to happen.
Wow. Wow, that was healing just to hear that, just to really feel that, those words in my body.
What you were saying with the breath work, you know, why have you never felt that? Well, one of the things that we had discussed before was that even within the world of healing is very masculine. And it's wonderful, we're trying and we've created great strides. But when we, you know, again, like 5 years ago even, when we would talk about healing, it was all about subconscious reprogramming. It was all about the mind, the mind, the mind. But, you know, even talk therapy, we're in that frontal lobe, we're in that mind. But real healing for this generation, the Shekhinah, the divine feminine, is in exile. So the healing that this generation needs for us to get back to the Beis Hamikdash is deep within our bodies. It's a descent. And the feminine energy is a descent. So I'll see a lot of practitioners who are doing healing modalities, but it's not necessarily about the modality. It's about the intention. It's about what's streaming through you. It's about this descent that has to happen and fully inhibiting the womb so that we can unravel our ancestral trauma. We can unravel our ancestral stories so that we can unravel all that the womb has been holding, not just in your lifetime, but from so many lifetimes. You know, your mother, you think about your mother, you think about your grandmother, you think about the lives that they've had for generation after generation. This is the generation before Mashiach where we're going to go in. We're going to go into the womb and we're going to hold space for her, and we're no longer going to be scared of her.
Wow.
Because going into the depths of yourself is terrifying. And I think each person has a unique gift in this world. Each woman has a unique gift. And it's not about, you know, I've taken many courses. I've worked with amazing mentors, amazing facilitators, amazing teachers. I am nothing without them. But the best teachers in the world will tell you, I can't teach you a system. What I can do for you is I can help you remember. And you hear this in the Torah all the time, Zachor, 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 remember, remember. And that's what this work is about. That's what womb work is about. It's about a remembering.
Wow. Wow. So it's, when you say descension, you mean going into the body.
Yeah.
And which is interesting because I think a lot of spirituality is like about getting high.
Jumping from the moon to Jupiter.
Yeah, like getting, and even just
Yeah.
getting high, like you hear about these Kabbalists or these, again, masculine, a lot of it is
Yeah.
masculine, where they lose themselves, they have klais hanefesh, and it's all about high.
Yes.
Literally the opposite of descension.
Yes.
And I think that that is such an interesting distinction.
Yes.
And I think, as you're saying, specifically to women, and I'm not here, I don't know enough to say this is, getting high is wrong. And I'm sure there was.
You need both.
Yeah, you need both.
But we need the descent first. We
And
need to
particularly
first
for
descend.
women, or would you say also
No,
men?
I think for everyone, because again, the Shekhinah is in exile.
Right.
And, you know, there's many stories of, you know, when you learn about other, not just our culture, but other cultures, and you read literature, I mean, there's stories in the Amazon where they would talk about their connection with the moon and women and their bleeding. And men, you know, when you think of our sense of smell is actually one of our strongest senses when it comes to ancestry. And one of the things that would happen when we would live in a tribe is that most women, not all, but most women would bleed with the new moon. And what would happen is we would have a collection of hundreds of women, you know, because we're thinking tribal. So we have a tribe of hundreds of women bleeding at the same time. And what would happen is, you know, whether you're aware of the smell or not, the men would actually pick up that scent. You know how they say, like nowadays, I've seen it all over social media now, that women are getting off birth control and breaking up with their boyfriends.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because they smell different. Because birth control actually distorts your sense of smell.
Wow.
And scent.
You're saying the woman smells the man differently?
Smells the man differently. So the men would actually pick up on that scent of the blood, and they would actually be reminded of, what is their first memory of blood? What's their first memory?
A man?
A man's, yeah.
Birth, you mean? Wow.
And it would bring them back into their divine masculine, their divine feminine within them.
Oh, wow.
And a man, to be a proper divine masculine man, he needs to also have a foundation of that divine feminine. And so we don't have that anymore. You know, a lot of the work that I do is, I say it's in 3 parts. So I work with my courses is a re-education. We need to have the tools. We need to have, you know, the world, they say, that was created first with God's imagination. So think about how powerful your visualization is. So if we don't know what the liver looks like, we don't know how our ovaries function, we don't know the actual process of fertility and birth. A lot of women I'll work with who are infertile, they'll just learn about the process of birth, the process of reproduction, what's going on in their cycle throughout the month. And all of a sudden they'll find themselves pregnant.
Wow.
You know, whether it's a month later, 2 months later, a few months later, because our connecting that mind and that body connection, that is the union of divine masculine and divine feminine. And every man and every woman have divine masculine and divine feminine. But, you know, one of my favorite mentors and just, just amazing people. He was telling a story, and he said, I think that I've gotten to a place where I'm finally 51% masculine and 49% feminine. And I've finally made it to the apex of what being a divine masculine man is. And I think that within each of us, we have these ratios, and we have to really have a good, healthy foundation of both. But obviously with women, and I think the world, what's really lacking is that divine feminine.
Right.
And so how powerful it is that we bleed, how powerful it is that we're connected to birth, and for men as well.
Yeah, for sure. And what's even more, I think, fascinating about this whole, because globally women bleed, and there's a lot of like taboo or even like disgust.
Skip your period.
Yeah, or even disgust.
Take the pill, skip the sugar pills.
Don't have to do, right, exactly. And messing up the whole cycle within it. And a lot of it comes from ignorance. Like you said, they don't even know. We don't know what's going on. A lot of us don't even know what's going on. So it's easy to say, oh, I'll just skip it because it's inconvenient and it's painful and it's just, it's going to ruin my vacation,
Yeah.
But within the Jewish world, we have so many divine laws, intricate rules and regulations. And again, for women who don't understand or have not been taught or have not been interested in learning about their bodies, let alone the rules, and then are not making the connections between the power and the rules, between the power that their body has and the rules of nida and mikvah, it's so easy to just reject it all. Yeah. And I know a lot of women that just don't go to the mikvah anymore because they're on birth control. Yeah. And it's so sad.
So sad.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Because if you're on birth control, and I don't think most women, that's where consent comes in, is that most women aren't given proper consent to the fact that when you're taking birth control, the sugar pills were actually developed. You don't necessarily need to take the sugar pills. And that's why a lot of women skip them. They were actually developed because women were so creeped out by the fact that they weren't bleeding. Because it's considered, if you read a textbook, it's considered your fifth vital sign. Just like you have a heartbeat, you have a pulse, you have respirations, you have a cycle. Right. And when birth control first came out, it was so alarming to them to not have a bleed. So then they added in the sugar pills so that there was this breakthrough bleed, but it's actually not menstruation. Because a proper menstrual cycle is marked by ovulation. And what happens when you take birth control is that shuts down ovulation and dries up the cervical crypts, which create the cervical fluid. I don't think most women realize what they're doing when they are on birth control. Not that they're doing, but whether it's to prevent pregnancy or whether they have PCOS, like I had. So I was put on birth control when I was 15 because I had PCOS.
What is that?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I had cysts on my ovaries and in my uterus, and I had all sorts of issues. I didn't get my cycle, for 9 months at a time.
Oh, wow.
That was a huge part of my journey.
Wow.
And I think Hashem really...
So you first had your period and then it stopped?
I didn't get it until I was about 14. Oh. And then I wouldn't get it for like a long periods of time, 9 months, 6 months. And they were excruciating.
Oh, wow.
And it makes sense because of the way that I was raised was that it was a shameful thing to bleed. Wow. Women should, go out, they should have a separate tent, which is such a beautiful concept. The red tent is a beautiful concept, but it was taken and then manipulated into being something to use against women. And so that's where I went on this journey of like connecting to my body, connecting to my cycle, because birth control made me, I was severely depressed on it. I felt horrible. It made me really sick. And I'm someone who, if I'm taking something that's making me sick, I'm not going to continue. Right. So I tried many different forms for years, and somehow it led me one to another. to this story of, healing my cycle and healing my body.
Wow.
And,
And
it was
you
amazing.
don't have that disease anymore? Or is it, what is it, a disease?
So it's a syndrome.
Syndrome?
A lot of it is being linked to environmental factors. So environmental factors are the skincare products that you use. It's the cleaning products that you use. It's the environment around you. I think that energetically, if we're to look at it as an energetic level, everything, according to Hasidus, is 4 worlds. So everything is that mental, emotional, spiritual, and then physical world. Everything has to manifest in the physical. So I think spiritually it was there. The anchor for that to manifest was through the story of how I was raised, that shame of being a woman, the shame that I should be less feminine. And I'm a Leo rising, so I should be more like a tomboy. That was glorified. Using our femininity against us. And that really led me through the process of, I think, developing the PCOS, was because of the energetic story that I went through. And then the environmental factors and everything else was part of the physical story. Right. But everything's happening on all 4 worlds. Everything, there needs to be there needs to be an energetic anchor for anything to manifest physically.
Right. Wow. And what's fascinating and sad at the same time is that while this was happening to you in like a world away from most women who are going to be listening to this, in the Jewish world mostly, that's my audience, is that we in our culture, in our Jewish tradition, have also in many communities literally manipulated and distorted the concept of bleeding and nida to feel, so many women that I speak to, like something gross, something wrong with us, something like unclean, and you have to, separate because something is wrong with you. And
I think it's amplified for sure in the Jewish community. I also think that, as we know, we read the Torah, that's our true north. Everyone has to choose in society what your true north is. Mm-hmm. What is your truth? I tell my kids this: if you look at history, I love history. And if you look at other cultures, the Spartans, if a child wasn't born in an absolute level of perfection, they would throw it off a cliff. The Romans, it was a rite of passage to do unlawful acts with minors before they would get married. That was part of their culture. So I think it's really important to note that we live in a different culture now, which is saying many things, what's okay and what's not okay for children to have surgeries and gender and all of these different things. And I'm not here to say anything, but I am here to say that everyone needs to choose what their true north is. And I chose the Torah and Hashem. That's my true north. Right. And for me, I look at the Torah as a technology, as a sacred technology that was given to us on Mount Sinai. And I think that when we look at it as a discipline, there isn't any ascended master, guru, healer, any big person in the world, someone who's really created change in the world, that hasn't had to master a discipline. Why? Because discipline actually comes from the divine feminine. And the divine feminine creates sacred geometry. We create babies in our womb. The man gives us a seed, we flesh out a baby. He gives us ingredients, we flesh out food. We make meals. He gives us a house, we create a home. And I think that when we look at Nida and Mikvah as not so much of a have-to, as rules, as regulations, but as this is a manual, as a technology, that if we do these things, this will happen. If we don't, we're not necessarily creating that sacred geometry. So what are we creating? We're creating chaos. Right. And we also know if you subscribe to the fact that the Torah is your true north, as I do, Amalek exists. It says there's a physical thing that is Amalek that's constantly trying to destroy us. And I think at one point it was war. But I think at this point, it's understood that women, the power of the Jewish people is in the women. The power of the Jewish people is in our sexual energy. And in one of the courses that I teach, one of the spirals we go through is just learning about sensual and sexual energy and how to harness it and how to reclaim it as not just a beautiful thing, but something that's part of the Torah and part of the beauty, but it's like a fire. And there's a famous quote that in the Gemara that says, and he saw the Yetzer Tov and it was good, and he saw the Yetzer Hara and it was very good. And the Yetzer Hara is reference to our bodily functions, our primal, thrusts in life, our primal desires. And why was it stated as very good? Because just like you have a fire in your home to warm your feet, to keep your kids from freezing in the winters, to cook your food, that's sexual energy. And we have to have these gates, and we have to have these parameters. We have to have a way of harnessing that in creating sacred geometry and creating and shaping it. Otherwise, it can also burn your house down with you and your family in it, and do unimaginable things. Fire, as you know, can burn a hole. We have wildfires, etc. And that's sexual energy. And so when we look at mikvah and nida, and we understand that it's a beautiful technology and not so much as regulations and rules, and we know that the Jewish people, our power is in our sexual energy. What would be the first thing if you were trying to destroy the Jewish people? What would you go after first? You would go after the women and their connection to their bodies and their sexuality and their fertility and their birthing.
Wow.
And that's really how the Magnetic Mother was started.
Right.
Is I wanted to reclaim that this being a mother, birthing, bleeding, raising children, this is the most powerful thing that we could possibly do. And again, like I said, men, if they had a womb, if they had this magical portal that took something completely spiritual and made it physical, whether it's a baby or a business, or if it was a relationship, it all has to go through this cycle of creation through our wombs energetically. Every month we are processing through our wombs. And again, if men had it, they would there would be hundreds and billions of more books.
Wow. It's wild that, like, when you're saying about Amalek, and I feel that Amalek is right here within our Jewish community, because and it's just so, because I live my house is like a little outside of the community, but Muncie area is so ultra Orthodox, and there's so much beauty in it, and there's so much goodness in it. But the women, a lot of the women are so disconnected from their power. I'm only beginning to connect to my power, but so many women are so disconnected from the power to the point where they don't know there's anything to connect to.
Yes.
And because rabbis and men have been in charge for so long, which is another thing that I know is a little controversial to discuss, is this whole concept of going to men, going to rabbis for things that are not their forte, not something that they understand. They don't understand it.
Yeah.
I was speaking to someone who's almost a dayan, an incredible close friend of mine. And when I was talking to him about tznius, he's someone that I respect tremendously. And this is what made me respect him even more, is as soon as I was talking to him about tznius and how I don't understand, I wanted to understand, where did the halachas come from? Because based on what I'm understanding is that tznius actually was something that a woman had the power to decide, oh, this is not tznius. This doesn't feel tznius to me. Yes, we had the thigh, but tznius today became so much more than it ever was. And there's also a concept where if a community took something on, then that becomes the halacha, because you're not going backwards. But it was really something that we had jurisdiction over our level of tznius and what that meant for us as women. But over the years, and now what's happening now in a lot of communities is that the rabbis, the men, are in charge. Anyways, I was speaking to him, trying to understand the order, the where things started to shift, and I was getting into the details of the thigh and this and that, and he's like, actually this is very uncomfortable for me, and I don't think you should ask any man, any rabbi, what the rules are. This is something that women should decide amongst themselves. And of course there's halacha today, because that's where we are and that's where we came to as a society in terms of tznius. But and I'm not discounting that, and I'm sure we have to go by it, and we have to learn it, and we have to figure that out. But what he was saying is women have power, have jurisdiction over feminine parts of the world, of our lives, and we have to own it. We have to
like the
own
oral
that.
Torah, it waxes and it wanes.
Yeah.
And it's fluid almost.
Right.
You know, but where we've lost that because we are in Gullus. I can think of off the top of my head 2 stories that really propelled me early on in my career. When I was solely working in the beginning of my career, I was a nursing assistant. And I then became a massage therapist and then went into somatic healing. And the beauty of that was that I had thousands of bodies in front of me where I was just in sacred relationship with a body, you know, for no reason other than to, you know, help relieve pain or whatever the case may be. And there's 2 stories early on that really affected me and propelled me forward with this work that aren't even my stories, but I was seeing with one, a woman came to me and she was seeing me for a while. And she finally got to a place where she felt safe enough to tell me that a few of her children, like she had, I think 5 kids, and I think her second, she was on vacation or something, and she went to, something was wrong. And she went to a hospital someone recommended, and the doctor walked in, and I had a very similar situation with my first. Baruch Hashem, he is alive and well, but he walked in and he said, here's your baby. The sonogram woman right before that had shown her the baby, and the baby's heart rate was fine and everything was fine. And then the doctor comes in cold, probably didn't even look at her, and says, so you're dilating and we can't stop it, so you're gonna lose your baby. And he gave her 2 options, and he was using, you know, doctor speak. So she didn't fully understand what her options were. But in the middle of mourning, it was also Yontiv, I think, you know, within a few hours, Erev Yontiv. And while she was mourning, she had to make this decision as to how she was going to proceed with the demise of her baby that was still kicking, beating. So she was very young. I think she got married at 17, so I think she was like 19 years old at the time when this happened. And she said she called she didn't want her father to know. For some reason, she was terrified for her father to know. And so she called a rabbi, someone recommended, and he said, do whatever the doctor says. Do it. I mean, you hear this a lot in our community, especially I find in the Jewish from communities. Yes. Because I work with both, and I hear it over and over. Trust your doctor. Yeah. Trust your rabbi. Trust your doctor. Take away any thought process. Right. Don't trust yourself. That doesn't exist. Right. What is intuition? We don't know what that is. Just trust your doctor, trust your rabbi, trust your husband, trust everyone outside of yourself, except for your own inner authority. And so he just said, whatever your doctor says. And she only realized years later, because he was pushing for her to have anesthesia and for them to medically remove the baby. Wow. And what she didn't realize was that it was basically an abortion and the process of how that is done. And I don't know if you've ever seen... Even though the baby was kicking and everything? Baby was healthy, but she was dilating, and he said there was nothing that they could do. And she, you know, at the time, she said to me, she's like, I can't live with the guilt that I have, that I didn't just deliver my baby and let it die in my arms. Versus, if you've ever seen an abortion, the way it's done is... you know, there's, you know, anyone can look it up. It's a horrible process for the fetus. Like, it's absolutely agonizing and just not a respectable way of passing. And she was given that choice? Or she was said, you could do this, or, you know, or you could deliver the baby naturally, but I don't recommend it because he wanted to get home for dinner, most likely. Right. And they make a substantial amount of money when they do these procedures as well. So a lot of C-sections. And it's hard to believe that, a doctor who takes an oath. But, you know, in my own case with my firstborn, I went in and I went to get my sonogram. Everything was fine. They checked my hormones. Oh, your progesterone's a little low. And then the doctor came in, didn't look at me, cold, crinkly paper, you know, fluorescent lighting, perfect for disassociation. It's literally the perfect storm for getting a woman to disassociate from her body, those little rooms. You know, you're most likely going to lose your baby. And just go home. It will probably take about 2 weeks. And I was like, I just had a sonogram, and the woman said they'll probably just give me progesterone, like just to supplement my hormones. And he's like, it's too early, and you know, it's probably not going to work. And it's very expensive. That's what he told me. And I sat there and I said, I want the prescription.
Wow.
Now.
My goodness.
And that was another story that propelled me, that women need to know that they have authority, that their intuition holds weight.
Right.
That your internal intelligence, whether it makes sense or not, whether you have a degree to back it up or not, or smicha, your inner intelligence holds weight. Just like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. They didn't always listen to their husbands, as we all know.
Exactly. And I think that that's getting lost. It's so, I mean, I definitely did not have self-trust or definitely not autonomy or self-sovereignty for so long.
Do you even realize that it's your baby when you're in the hospital?
Right.
You know.
What would you tell that lady now? Like, what would, for someone that's going to experience something like that, what would have been something she should have done?
So that's really why my courses were born, is because, yes, I'm working with the body, doing somatic work, and we're working with the body to create pelvic presence. That's what I call my method, pelvic presence, divine union, because the purpose of creation is to bring heaven down to earth and for them to marry. And so I work with women's bodies to help them with this descent, to fully inhibit their womb and their pelvic space. But then we also have to have the piece of education. And that's where the courses come into. When we deeply resource ourselves, when we understand our anatomy and physiology, when we can visualize the process of fertility and our fertility cycle and conception and birth, and we understand our body, we are then deeply resourced to go into these conversations, whether it's your rabbi or it's your doctor or it's your husband. You know, most men these days, you know, like you were saying, we have to go to men to ask, but at the end of the day, we're going to men who also, you know, if we don't know, they for sure are disconnected. Yeah. And so it's about re-educating. It's first creating pelvic presence. It's creating where we're safe in our bodies to do this descent, do this deep work, but then also educating ourselves so that we're so deeply resourced with our bodies that we can advocate for ourselves. Right. And we can say, yes, I'm hiring you. I am hiring you as a doctor. I'm hiring you as a rabbi. You are a tool to help me make decisions for myself. But you can't do that if you walk in and you have no idea what they're saying and you have no idea how your own body works. Right. And that's where, again... And
they have no idea who you are or what your story is most of the time either.
You know yourself better than... And I'll say this to mothers. You are the mother. Nobody knows your child better than you. No doctor, no rabbi, no, you know, other lady at the playground. Right. No mother. You know, if it's your mother, they're the child's grandmother. You know your baby better than anyone else. Yeah. And women need to understand the weight of that. The weight of their intuition, the weight of when they take the time. And let me tell you, you know, for generations, we had a red 10. And what would happen is a woman would receive her first bleed. She would go to the red tent with her mother and her sisters and her aunts, and she would be greeted by the elders. The elders would initiate her into being a woman. They would educate her. They would give her a lineage of knowledge that, you know, when a woman would birth, the same thing, and the elders would care for her. We don't have that anymore. And every exile and every Holocaust, the Jewish people, and I say more so than other cultures, because we've had so many exiles, we've had so many Holocausts and wars, and every single time we are disconnected from our elders. We're disconnected from generations of healing that was passed down, of wisdom that was passed down. And what I'm trying to do, and I know so many other women are trying to do nowadays, is we're trying to bring back the red tent. We're trying to bring back a space for women to come together, to bleed together, to weep and grieve together. How many women have a miscarriage nowadays? How many of your friends, your sisters, our own selves, and you're not supposed to tell anyone. Don't tell anyone, keep it silent. It should be, you know, don't look at it, it didn't happen. What happened to the grieving process? How many women do I work with where they actually have to go through the process of birth? You know, whether they went to the doctor and it was surgically removed again, which is happening most of the time with miscarriage. Most of the time the baby is not passing naturally. And what happens? The body has no idea what happened. The body's holding that. It's holding all of that. And so a lot of times I'm working with a woman and they're carrying loads of grief that was said, be quiet, don't tell anyone, keep it on the down low. Don't even look at it yourself, and never grieve. And so we have women who are just walking around grieving, but the process is being stunted, so they never fully get out of that grief process. Wow. Because that's what the womb does. It holds, it gestates, and then it births. And we need to go through that process. Just like healing, we need to have the fever. We need to have the chills. We need to have the sweats. We need to have the vomiting. That's part of the healing process. And women, we need to go through our processes of grieving. We need to go through our processes of pleasure. And how many women, like we were talking about earlier, aren't ovulating? Right. When ovulation is the best part of my cycle. Wow. Why would you ever not ovulate? It's like, I feel like superhuman. Right. For a week, it's only about 2 days, but for that energy, that phase is like 5 days to a week that you feel superhuman. And so many women aren't getting to experience that because we're stopping the biological process of women. So women aren't connected to their intuition because they're disconnected from their cervix. Your nervous system roots into your cervix, and we're disconnecting that connection. And what are we left with? We're left with zombies, with numbness. And there's a saying within the world of midwifery. If you want to see how a woman lives, watch her birth. Watch how she labors and watch how she births. And if you want to see how a generation is thriving, watch how are they birthing en masse. So if I was to ask you, when you think of birth, maybe before you had children, you just thought like, okay, a young 17-year-old, 18-year-old girl, she thinks of birth. What does she think of?
I'm just thinking baby before then.
What,
like, I'm
birth?
not even, yeah,
what do you think of birth?
I don't think I was thinking about the actual process of birth. Like painful,
right
hard.
Now, hard. What do you see on the movies? Painful, what do you see happening? You go to the
like screaming.
Hospital. There's bright lights.
Right.
It's like a surgery is happening. You're diseased. But what is the woman feeling, if you had to think of anything, like with your knowledge now, when you think of the majority of women in our culture, how do they birth? What are they feeling in their bodies?
I feel like most women are not connected to themselves during the process.
And you would say numb.
Yeah. And
so we have an entire generation. We want to see how the Jewish women are living. They're numb.
Right.
They're absolutely numb. And that's where the pelvic presence method comes in. So we must create presence in our pelvis. We must feel, whether it's grief, whether it's sadness, whether it's pain. We need to feel. We live in a society that wants us to just be the maiden all the time, be the tomboy, be easy. Don't be complicated. You're dramatic. You're a bitch. You're bossy. If you feel anything, you are immediately labeled something bad. But what happens when we take that away? What happens if we just allow girls to feel? Right. What's going to happen is we're going to have a huge upheaval within our marriages, within our families, and maybe Mashiach will come. Maybe it will come tomorrow. But it has to start with women feeling.
What would you say, aside from going to retreats, and which is obviously I think where you actually have that time and space to really just like tap into that whole world. But is there something like every day that you do, or to feel more?
To feel, I would say 100% that my course is one of the things we teach is fertility awareness as a mindfulness practice. So a lot of fertility, when I learned fertility awareness, I had just had my second, and I had, tried all the birth controls. I knew I didn't want to do that. I had gotten an IUD, it got lodged in my cervix.
Oh, wow.
I was, I switched to a diaphragm, it was just every single day, it was just annoying. Yeah. So my mother, she, like I was saying earlier, she was actually Irish Catholic. She grew up Irish Catholic and converted. And we're not allowed to say that out loud. I know, it's dangerous. Right. But she, she would tell me about the nuns, and it's very much so part of Catholic culture that when you get married, you actually learn fertility awareness. So the way that I learned it was just like through like a quick online workshop situation where it was very cold. It was very disconnected. The nuns, I don't know if you've ever experienced nuns, but that was the only place you could learn about fertility awareness.
I've only seen them ever No, I never had experience with that.
Yeah, so it's like the Catholic.
They teach it?
They would teach it, for that you have to learn almost all.
Meanwhile,
Catholics,
they don't have children, right?
No, they're very into not using birth control. So all Catholics learn fertility awareness. So they teach it. They're the ones who teach it. But the nuns
themselves don't have children, right?
No.
So it's interesting that they're the teachers.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Because Christianity doesn't view sexuality the same way Jewish culture does. We look at it as a beautiful thing. The highest level of attainment is when you're with your husband. It's when the Shekhinah is present.
Right.
And Christianity is you were born in sin, and why was, their leader, I don't want to say his name, but, why was he so perfect? Because he was, from divine conception. There was no physical act. And
so any physical act is considered.
So they look at it as a means to an end, but that, abstinence is the highest form of attainment, which is very anti-Jewish. And that's why my mother would always say, Judaism has been infiltrated by Christianity. This was something she would always say. Right. My mother was like a real believer. Like she gave me all of my faith for sure. She was just, the Jewish people are so blessed. Like we are so blessed to be Jewish. Even though there was plenty of dysfunction and chaos, and I have a long story that I'll write one day.
Right.
But she gave me that faith. Wow. Like she is the most Jewish person I've ever met.
Wow.
Like inside. And so she had told me about this. And so I took the course. It was very cold. It was like learning, it was like straight halacha. Mm-hmm. And what would happen is that you're then, whether you're checking your cervix, that's part of fertility awareness, or whether you're checking your cervical fluids, what happens is that once you start working with your cycle and you start working with your cervix, whether you like it or not, you're going to go through a process of remembering. You're going to go through a process of memories are going to come up. You're going to feel things that you've never felt before. And the way that it was taught before, and I think most where I see it being taught now is it's very much so like this is what you do, very masculine, like self-help. It's all very, I see people doing breath work and it's still very masculine. It's very But the way that I developed the fertility awareness that I teach is that it's an intuitive process. Mm-hmm. And so whether we can get to the point where, like it says in the Gemara, where we can feel our cervix open, which I think that is a possibility. I do believe that when you are so in tune to your body that we can get to that place where we feel our ovaries releasing an egg. We could feel our cervix opening. And I know that's controversial because it says that we can't, but I think a lot of those rules will be... It says
that we can't?
It says that since the Beis Mikdash is destroyed, we can't. That level of attunement that women had with their bodies. Have you heard that statement before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, women used to be able to just feel when they were nida, they could feel their cervix opening. And the way that I teach it is that it's an intuitive process where we're going to deepen our sensations. Wow. And we're going to know what to do when emotions come up, when memories come up, when things that weren't processed now need to get processed. So what can we do every day is work with your cycle. That's the number one thing that women should be doing, is working with their cycle. And the hardest part for women is to trust themselves. Right. And even when we're working with creating that pelvic presence, I'm working with them one-on-one, we're doing the courses, they're going to the retreats, it takes time and space for women to take that leap of faith, to trust themselves. I'm ovulating. I trust. I'm not just relying on the apps, which is like the new doctor or rabbi, another outside authority. I always say in my classes, we don't use apps. Right. I want you to rely on you. Right. I want you to trust in your intuition. Right. Trust in your sensations. And so that is a mindfulness practice that I think every woman should be doing, is starting off by learning your fertility cycle. Start with something small. Just start checking your cervical fluid. And for some women, it's just, even just looking at their vulva is hard. Right. And that's something you should be doing just to make sure you're healthy. Once a month, you check your breast, you check your vulva. This is something that all women should be doing, but they're terrified. Right. And so start the process of just connecting to your body and allowing the shame to be there, because it's going to be there. The shame is ingrained in us. Again, it's ingrained. Why? Because of tznius and everything we're taught? I think when you think of Judaism, and my husband has lots to say about this, but you think of Judaism, we're an indigenous culture. You think of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, they were tribal people. They weren't, living in modern society. They weren't living in Egypt, in the modern society. They lived in the desert. They were, with David HaMelech was with his flock. But what it's become is no longer connected to the earth. It's no longer connected to the land. You know, I was very fortunate at the time. I didn't think I was, but I grew up raising animals. And so I had, you know, to see the process of breeding animals and raising animals. And I got to birth, you know, hundreds of puppies and see that process and have that connection to the earth. You know, we lived on a farm. So I got to see the farms next door, and we always had a garden, and we had that connection.
Yeah.
But where we've lost contact is that we no longer have that connection to our indigenous culture. And that's where I think Christianity has infiltrated Judaism, just like my mother said. There's so many, the shame, I think, has really, you know, you think about our oppressors for thousands of years was Christianity. You know, most of the exiles that we've been through were from Christianity. Yes, there were some other ones, for sure.
Right.
But Christianity, you know, that is their way of thinking, is very feminine is bad.
Right.
Sexuality is bad. And after, you know, who destroyed the Beis Mikdash?
And it's bad because they can't control it.
You can't control women.
Yeah.
You know?
And they want it, but they can't control it.
They know that we're powerful.
Yeah.
I think that there is, you know, the high up, whoever, there is a society of people that know how powerful we are.
Yeah.
And I think we know that.
What's also interesting is that as much as we don't trust ourselves, in Jewish tradition, it's up to the woman to say that she's kosher.
Yeah.
It's up to the woman to run a kosher home.
Yeah.
And even though it's ingrained in our tradition, it's still she doesn't own it. Like, it's up to me to say if I'm kosher or when I'm not, or when I'm nida.
She's terrified of herself.
Right.
She's terrified of her power. And that was me for years.
Yeah.
Even though I was this alien going through life in this very interesting way.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting childhood. I had a very interesting, you know, early adult life. And it took me years to reclaim my power. Wow. That's one of the greatest things that we get from this womb work, is that we get to reclaim our power. Oh. You know, there was times where, I think one of the questions that you asked me, you know, you sent me a series of questions, and I think it was the third one. What was it? You said, where did it all start?
Yeah.
And there's so many different things. We mentioned so many anchors in my life that were places that propelled me. But the first thing that came to mind was there was a moment where I was a shell of a human being. And I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago, you know, 12 years ago. And there was a moment where I was 100% suicidal at the time. I was in a really, really bad place. I was meek, I was small. And my best friend, actually, I didn't know her at the time, but she sat down next to me and she looked at me and she said, "Who are you?" She's like, "I need to get to know you."
Wow.
And through the next few years, it was one sister recognizing me, saying, "You deserve to live." At the time, I didn't have anyone in my life. My husband's incredible. He was going through his own journey of, you know, disassociation, which I think we see in this culture a lot, and finding himself. And as you know, it always takes the woman first. Yeah. And so at the time, I didn't have, you know, family that believed in me, and I felt so alone. I felt so small, and it took one sister. And that's the power of sisterhood. Yeah. And that's what's going to take us out. And that's why it's a commandment. We must celebrate Rosh Chodesh. Women need to gather together. Because when we can step outside of the sister wound of, you know, jealousy, competition, paranoia, feeling like there isn't enough, that scarcity mindset that doesn't allow us to, you know, prop up other women, we could step out of that. The person that I am today is 100% because this person, Ariella, she sat down next to me and said, "I see you." Wow. And for the next few years, she transformed my life by just seeing me. All she did was say, "You have something. Yeah, it might be different. It might be a little strange to most people. It might be, but you have something." Wow. And it deserves to take up space. And that's the power of sisterhood.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Because like so often we don't value our own voice to be there for somebody else.
Yes.
Wow. Incredible. How do you feel and how do you fit in hair covering into all of this?
So hair covering was actually interesting because you brought me down, I think it was 2 months ago.
Right.
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
I think once you have a few kids, that time, that's why we're not time bound, because we're just,
Yeah.
Living in
even though, which is
the land of
interesting
the wombs.
that you're saying that to create this healing, we need to create that time and space.
But we're not, it's more in these focused pockets. I think with women, we feel that we focus in on our children, we focus in on our clients, we focus in on something, and that, and then we create this buoyancy, this spaciousness within this moment.
Right.
It's actually a huge Kabbalistic idea, not for today, but it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
When you brought me down, we had talked about hair covering and why it's actually something that's very important to me. I was one of these people who, when I first got married, my husband he didn't love tznius. I was very tznius prior.
Right.
I went to Machon in Spot, so I was like, do you know what Machon is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a Baal Tshuva seminary, and it's very, they're hardcore. I was living in Crown Heights before that. So I was very, one way, and then I met my husband, and when you first get married, you want to be, you just want to become them.
Yeah.
Whatever they want.
Whatever they want.
And then you grow up.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really...
You were young, right?
I was 20 when I got married.
Right.
I was 19 when I met him. And one of the things that was always non-negotiable for me was wearing a wig. As the Rebbe says that you should always wear a wig. You should feel beautiful. And he didn't understand the concept, as I didn't really understand it. But one of the things that I always felt really connected to is I would go to the beach and wear a bikini at the time, not anymore, but now I'm an old mother.
Right.
But I would still wear a hair covering,
right.
which was so bizarre for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think that to this day, what really stuck with me was...
Which I think is amazing, because I think often people are actually scared of taking on something like, let's say, hair covering, because they feel like,
it's all or nothing.
So now it defines me, and now I'm a religious person, and now I have to do everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this next generation is a little bit more gray. As you said, it's not so much black and white, because I do think the divine feminine is rising, where there's more of that waxing and waning. But covering my hair was always just something I couldn't really understand it, but now it totally makes sense.
Wow.
And from learning about it, Rav Kook actually explains that your hair is like a hollow tube, and it's likened to the womb. And if you learn other cultures, the Rastafarians, they create dreads with intention, and each dread is like an antenna. And many other cultures, the Native Americans, they grow their hair out. Hair is an extremely important part of our culture because it's power. And that's why a Nazir would grow his hair out for his strength. Men are taught to grow their beards. Hair is an antenna. Why? Because it's like a womb. Just like we have to cover our womb, we have to cover the Torah. What happens is, if it's exposed, is that it's, what happens when you have a lighthouse in the darkness, things from all over will come and be attracted to that lighthouse. And that's the energy of the womb. The energy of the womb is it receives, it gestates, and then it births. So we have to be careful with what we are gestating, and our hair is the same. It will collect the energy around the people you're interacting with, the energy of the place that you're in. And Earth has energies. You can go to certain sites on the Earth, and they have a certain frequency. People travel everywhere to collect this energy, to just be on the Earth, where, it's similar to meridians in Chinese medicine. So our body has meridians, so the Earth also has meridians. And so there's certain sites that will collect energy, and we collect highly in our hair. And so this really stuck with me. This really affected me. And I felt that my hair, am I the most perfect hair covering specialist? No, I'll leave that to Zelda.
Neither am I.
But hair was just something where I also have the ability to understand that just because I'm doing one thing doesn't mean that I have to do everything.
Right.
Just because I'm not doing something doesn't mean I have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
But we can have one day and do something on that day and bring divine energy down to earth on that day, and then the next day might not be the same, but that's okay.
Right.
And I think hair covering is the same. I view it as a spiritual force that affects my body. And we all have customs in not just Judaism, but many cultures to protect that energy. Wow. And, again, after the Holocaust, the Inquisition, the Crusades, so many different exiles, we've just lost that. And that's why you see Sephardim, they're much more connected to their protective rituals.
Yes, they are.
Without the jaded energy.
And I guess
because they were living with Muslims,
exactly.
They weren't living with the Christians.
Right.
The Christianity, and I respect all religions, but how it affected the Ashkenazi Jews, I think is very, you could really see that. Versus the Muslims, I think they also have a lot of culture around sexuality, and I don't think it affected the Middle Eastern Jews as much, and that's why they don't have that shame or that resentment. Yeah,
and they're more connected to spiritual in general. I think the Christianity were just more cold and more logical and more masculine.
Yeah.
You'll see in Sephardi houses, the woman is oftentimes much louder and dominant.
Yeah, they're much more tribal. Yeah. So they didn't lose that indigenous connection to the land because that's still very strong in the Middle East.
Right. That's so powerful about the hair covering because women, it's something that women struggle with a lot. I mean, I'm in the wig industry, deep in it, and I still struggle with it all the time, regardless of how much I learn. Obviously, the more I learn about it and the more inspired I get about it, it becomes easier. But what I love, what you keep on mentioning about the moon waxing and waning, is that this idea of perfectionism, I have to be this all the time, is so overwhelming. Yes. And just connecting to the idea of our cycle of, some days I'm so, I'm ovulating and I want to be in everyone's, on the platform and on social media and on stages. And some days I want to hibernate. And I think the same way with our connection to our faith and our the mitzvahs of hair covering, of whatever it is. Some days I'm much more turned on with it and excited about it and passionate about it. And some days I'm so not. And showing myself grace with that process, I think takes away a lot of that resentment.
And also holding reverence for, even though you're not in the mood for something, even though something is too much that day, but still being able to hold two realities at the same time, that it's too much for me right now, but I can also still hold the reverence and the beauty. And that's what we do, is we create that atmosphere of reverence and holiness and sacred. And so maybe it's too difficult today to cover my hair, but I can still appreciate it and still love it.
I feel like I learn so much in your presence all the time. I feel like you have so much wisdom. I would love to take this to a practical space of, there's so much to know, there's so much to learn, there's so much information out there. And I find that obviously the most practical items that we could take on is the most effective for change, at least for me, things that I could actually bring into my day-to-day that inspire me to change, that help me connect to my sovereignty, that help connect to my power. What could you tell women what could we do to connect more to our power?
So first is joining my online community. It was created for this. It was created for women to have a safe place to come together as women and to learn about their bodies, to learn about the process, and to learn about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a sensual, sexual being. And then on your own, I think looking up in your area nowadays, I know I have a healing chat, and I know there's many others, of just connecting people with spaces, healing spaces. Look up in your area. It's going to feel weird in the beginning. Go to yoga. That might feel weird also. Anytime we do anything different, it's going to feel weird. And looking for places to come together with women to actually move forward, to do something new, to go outside of yourselves, to take that leap of faith. It's going to feel really awkward. And I think taking some time to maybe journal about why you feel that way, why you feel that way, journaling about what's coming up for you, where you're feeling it in your body, but then doing it anyways. Getting up and finding those spaces on Rosh Chodesh to connect with women. creating circles yourself with maybe just 3 other women. You know, you don't have to know what you're doing, but just come together under the new moon and talk about the month, talk about whatever you'd like. You don't even have to discuss a Torah topic, but just coming together as women, I think as Jewish women, is such a powerful thing. But understanding that in life, staying in our comfort zone is not where we're going to find growth. We're not here to be, as Rabbi Twersky says, a content cow. I think a lot of the things that we hear, you know, in the world through media, the schisms are, you know, just what makes you happy, what gives you contentment, what gives you peace. But that's not what life is about. We're such dynamic, deep creatures. We're not meant to be a content cow, as he says, to go out to pasture and just moo and eat grass all day. We're meant to do something in this world. We were manifested in this generation to do something, to be someone, to create change, to create movement. And one of the laws of nature is that movement is life. And so, yes, are you going to go do something different? And is it going to feel weird? You know, for my first early on workshops, no one was sitting in circles. It was very strange to sit on a floor in a circle. And then I noticed after I did it, I saw so many other people doing it. Just by posting it online, I saw other women doing it. And I said, how uncomfortable. So many women sat down, they felt so uncomfortable. But now it's becoming norm. Yeah. And I think women don't realize that we have the power to normalize things. You know, breathwork, when I started doing breathwork, you know, early on in my career, I would say 8 years ago, something like that, it was so strange. People, it was way before it was cool. Why would you charge me to breathe? I can breathe on my own.
Right.
You know, little did they know, they didn't understand the power of connecting to your breath and using our breath as a tool and understanding it in a different way. But sitting with that feeling of, you know, this is normal. And you hear this in the Jewish communities often. It's not my type. It's not her type. This was one of the things when I first joined a Jewish community that just baffled me. Because I knew as a Jew, we're all unique expressions of God. So how could it be anyone's type? You know, when Mashiach knocks on our door, I don't think Mashiach's going to be our type.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be anything we've ever experienced before.
Right.
And I think having that courage and
right, like saying my type is basically saying
cutting yourself
off.
What
I'm comfortable with. This is what I've been doing till now.
Well, it's also that pressure of being normal because someone's going to talk about you or someone's going to look at you funny. And you know, we know that there's a huge influence of reputation within the Jewish community. Yeah. I think any community that you can quantify has that issue. And Jewish communities are very powerful ones. So we have that issue where people are so scared to do anything different that they're going to be ostracized. And that comes from a primal need to be connected to a community. Because think about it 1,000 years ago. If you were in a tribe and they thought you were a weirdo, they would either burn you at the stake or exile you. Right. And so we have this primal need to be part of a tribe because we need to survive. We need to eat. We need to partake. We need to reproduce. We need a tribe for that. And so it comes from this place of survival, but what it's been distorted into is where we have women that are terrified to do anything different. Wow. And so,
meanwhile, what's different for them is their unique genius.
Yes. Yeah. And what we're here to do is to be unique genius. Yeah. What we're here to do is to be a unique expression of God. And so that's going to feel uncomfortable. But what I always say is get comfortable in the uncomfortable. As Terence McKenna says, the universe rewards courage. And I think that that's something I say to my husband every day. It's something I say to myself. It's something I say to my kids every day. It's something I definitely say to my clients and my friends. But that taking a moment to breathe through whether you want to label it as awkward, whether you want to label it as not your type, whether you want to label it as not normal, you know, not normal. Just breathe with it. Sit with it. Feel into your body. But do it anyways. Right. Do it anyways in the name of sisterhood, in the name of tikkun olam. You know, bringing this world back together in the name of bringing Mashiach. It's going to come down to the women. And I say this in every single one of my breathwork workshops or whatever we're doing in the workshops. There's many different things that we do. Right. But what I always say is that when we think back to leaving Mitzrayim, you know, it wasn't men and their war, you know, their weapons and their war, but it was the women that called out to God with their bodies that took us out of Mitzrayim early. It was the women. And that's why so much of what we do in the workshops is just help women find their avenue of expression, because our avenue of expression is completely shut down. And you know, you hear this more now, but the throat and the pelvis are deeply connected. When you're born, when you're conceived, you're just a tube. And we learn embryology a lot within the world of body work and healing, because to understand how the organs evolve, we have to understand how you evolved. So in embryology, we understand that when you're conceived, you're just a tube with two ends. And that's that connection between the throat and the womb, you know, the hips and the jaw, the lips and the tongue and the vulva. They have a deep connection, because that's our avenue of expression. Whether we're vocalizing or our womb is birthing, it's an avenue of expression that women are disconnected from. And so during the workshops, find an avenue of expression. We'll try many different things, but whether you need to scream, whether you need to laugh, whether you need to kick, whether you need to breathe, yawn. So many women, when I'm teaching them how to breathe every day, just moving through Trader Joe's, how do you breathe? Right. You know, a lot of women are hyperventilating. A lot of men also. They're hyperventilating, and then they're wondering why they're full of anxiety. Take a pill, become numb, and the cycle continues. But one of the most difficult things for them is just to make a noise.
Wow.
And I can tell just by listening to a woman. We learn a lot of different evaluation techniques, but it's not just posture. A lot of times I can just listen to a woman's voice, and I can see how connected she is to her pelvic floor, to her diaphragm, and if she's breathing properly. Just over the phone, I can hear what's going on in your body,
right,
because your voice will reflect that.
Wow.
And how many women cannot speak? They
Wow.
can't make a noise. They can't. Breathing is, to breathe properly requires that you breathe it. You can hear it. It's going to sound just like when you ride a bike for the first time.
Right.
You know, it's so awkward. You don't know what you're doing. It feels like there's so many steps, but then you don't think about it anymore. Okay, so when I'm teaching women to breathe differently, it's going to sound louder. And sometimes we have to initiate that pelvic canopy, which is much like a drum. It's so difficult for them just to make noise. That deep guttural noise is out of the question, but just any noise,
right,
because our avenue of expression is just totally shut down. And so what I say, and I'll tie this together, is just that we need to have that courage. We need to step out of our comfort zone. We need to step out of our monkey mind that says, it's not normal, it's not my type, it's not this, it's not that. The Yetzer Hara will work in many different ways. The Sitra Achra, the upside down, whatever you want to call it, will work in many ways to shut down Mashiach coming, the ascension. You know, in the scientific world online, they call it the 5D. You know, whatever it is, solar flares.
Right.
You know, it's going to take us stepping outside of our comfort zone to open the door. And when Mashiach is standing there, to say, I'm going with you. Because right now, how many people do you think would go?
Right. Meanwhile, in Mitzrayim, people stayed. There were people that stayed back.
Only 1/5 left. Think about that right now. How many people, if they opened the door to Mashiach, and Mashiach was not what they were expecting, because I can guarantee you it's not going to be what you were expecting.
Right.
It's a totally different frequency we've never experienced before. How many people would say, I'm with you? And how many people would say, I'll see you later? Wow. Not my thing.
Even if they've been technically waiting for Mashiach?
They'll start saying, oh, it's not real.
Oh, it's this.
They'll get into the monkey mind, you know.
I'll wait.
Let me go get my cell phone first.
Let other people go first.
Gedalia Fenster, I think, I believe it was him, I'm quoting, I believe in one of his shiurs, he said, you know, if Mashiach comes to the door and you say, hold up, let me go get my cell phone, you're not going.
Right. Wow.
You know, and I think it's with women, it's the courage to ask the questions to the doctor. Because I could tell you it was so uncomfortable for me to ask questions. And it was so uncomfortable with your rabbi. You know, I had to get on the phone with a rabbi who, a Hasidic rabbi, barely spoke English. One of his congregants wanted to work with me. Birth control was destroying her marriage. She had no libido, we hear this all the time because it shuts down ovulation, you know? So she had all these health issues from it. She was depressed from it. She was on antidepressants, making it worse. That's the story, you know, that's a tale as old as time at this point. And I was talking to him about how the body works. He had no idea how the body worked at all, you know? A young rabbi, but this is who her rabbi is. And he said at the end of the conversation, he said, he didn't want to let her use a diaphragm for when she's ovulating because of whatever reasons. Many Rebbeim will say it's fine. Many Rebbeim, will, I don't know how many, but some will say it's not okay. He said, it's better for her to kill the egg than the man to kill the seed. He was referencing to the spermicide with the diaphragm. And I said to him, I was like, why does anything have to die? You can get gel that's not, that isn't killing anything.
Right.
Well, why does anything have to die? Why is that the reason that this woman should stay on birth control, stay on her antidepressants, and her marriage should be ruined, and et cetera, and like she should be in this depression?
He said it's better.
This was his reasoning, because it's better to kill the egg than to kill the sperm. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? But it takes courage to question that. And at the end of the day, I can only do so much. I am your doula. I am your body doula. I am your feminine doula.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I can only do so much. It's going to be up to you to ask questions further, to dig deeper. Is this halacha? Is this, where, teach me more.
Right.
Sit on the phone. Do the blood work I want. Give me the prescription I need for my baby. That takes courage to ask questions.
Right.
And so that's what we need to do every day is we need to journal about our discomfort. We need to face our discomfort. We need to find connections with other women who are on this path of healing the sister wound. Recognizing that we have this inside of us, that we have this scarcity mindset, that we have this competition, that we have this paranoia, this jealousy and this envy. Recognizing that, feeling that, owning it, but then doing things anyways to gather with women. Right. Doing things anyways to learn about our body, doing these courageous acts to believe in your intuition and allow your intuition to hold weight anyway.
Wow. So true. And also I find like that a lot of the times where, I mean, I can only talk for myself, but I can imagine it's similar for a lot of women that when we're so disconnected from ourselves, when I'm so disconnected from myself, being with my husband is also something that's just like another thing to do. It's not coming from desire. It's not coming from choice. It's not coming from divine feminine. It's coming from this numb, shut down place where I'm not connected to my power and I'm not connected to my realization that this is not okay. That just going through the motions and just getting things done physically. And again, I think it's beautiful where people do have simple faith and action is still done, like you're saying, to hold both, where you could hold your discomfort, that this is not okay, and still have reverence. I'm just repeating what you said.
You're doing great.
For the holiness, for the experience, for the
have honor.
For that union, but still, in order to have change and to have the union that is fire, that is true holiness, you need to be able to recognize when this is actually not where I want to be.
Awareness.
Yeah. So I think that's something that's lost also, definitely. I mean, it took me so long to be like, no, I want more, whether it's first we go on a date, whether, it could be something, but if I'm not connected to that something is wrong, then I'm not even asking for what I want.
If you don't even have the permission to stop and say, hey, something's wrong. Right. How many women are shut down when they bring up an issue? Right. How many women are saying, you're being dramatic? Right. You're being, not even from your husband, but from, in-laws or your family or from your community or from just your own head from years of, like you're saying. Right. But how many women are given permission to actually voice that, hey, something it's not sitting right. Right. And I need to trust that. Right. I can't imagine it was easy for our foremothers to trust that something just didn't sit right and then go against their husbands and switch their sons and do all these things.
Right. Right. And I think the permission ultimately comes from ourselves.
Yes.
Right, which is everything you're sharing now about the womb and the power.
Yeah, but the most beautiful thing is when we can have groups of women, when we can have that sisterhood and have that red tent to bolster us and to support us through that process of finding ourselves and finding our self-esteem and feeling deeply, again, resourced. Mm-hmm. That process of resourcing ourselves, unfortunately, in our generation, I think I know, is a painful one. But let's change that script for our children. Let's change that script for our daughters, that they can go through that process of awareness at the correct age of when they receive their bleed, and have it be a much more harmonious process where they have that support from us to then resource themselves. Because that's how it's supposed to be. It's not meant to be where, we already have children and trauma. And, I'm the first person to say, trauma is it's part of our journey. Who's to judge our trauma? Right. But at the same time, we don't want to necessarily have our kids go through the same thing we went through. And, we didn't get that luxury, but let's change that script and let's bring it more back into balance for our daughters. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm trying to do with my kids, is give them the ability to have that connection with the earth. And for girls, it starts with the earth. And talking about practical, have a garden, grow a plant, anything, but get that connection to the earth. So many people, they will never walk around barefoot. Right. Never. Even if there's so much now saying how healthy it is to be barefoot on the ground. But like, if you come from New York, it's obscene to be outside without shoes. they even have house slippers. Right. And so just get connected to the earth in some way. Go outside.
What is it about the earth? Do you think that
it's Mother Nature? Mm-hmm. Heaven and earth. That's what the Rebbe said, is the purpose of creation is to, connect heaven to earth. The earth is where Hashem wants us, like we were saying earlier. He doesn't want us in the cosmos, right, jumping from the moon to Jupiter. Hashem created the earth because he loves the earth. That is our archetype of the divine feminine, is the blossoming fertile earth. And when in my course that I teach, when we're learning about the fertility cycle, we look through different quotes where it talks about the land being filled with milk and honey. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to Israel? Yeah. Did you see milk and honey? No. Coming out of the walls? No. So there's many different commentators, and one that, it kind of, you can also be your own commentator. You can have thoughts and you can wonder in the mystery of that. And I think something that I saw that really struck me is that we always call the earth, we always call the land of Israel her, she. And she is flowing with milk and honey. I believe, and I know there's other commenters who do, but it's flowing with the milk from our breasts and the honey from our cervix. Wow. And what happens when we, one of the things I work with women is I help encourage them. Breastfeeding is hard. It's not easy, especially with our clothing and our society and SNEAS. And one of the things I do is get connected to the land. The land flowing with milk and honey is you. You are the land. Your body is the land. You take birth control, it shuts down the honey. Women do not, they're dry. Wow. They're dry and barren. And a woman's body, I think, shows us a reflection of how Israel's doing. And right now we see Israel's beginning to blossom again, and we see women getting off birth control, educating themselves, and their breasts are flowing with milk and their cervixes are flowing with honey again. But how many times, I don't know if you've ever been on birth control, but I know so many women went to the doctor, no one ever tells them it dries up your cervical crypts. And for some women, the reason they're infertile is because they were on birth control. First, it depends on your constitution. So some women, it's just a few months. Some women, it's been years. And their cervical crypts, they don't know how to get back online. They're so disconnected from their nervous system that connection is so frayed that their body doesn't know how to reconnect it. So they're not producing the cervical fluid that is required to conceive. You can't conceive without cervical fluid. And one of the things I'll do with them is we'll just work on practices of visualization using our breath to visualize that cervical fluid, visualize the anatomy and physiology of that, to help our brain, that mind-body connection, reconnect to the cervical crypts.
Wow. Wow.
So the earth is everything. It's Mother Nature is everything. It is the Shekhinah runs through her veins.
Yeah. Also, again, bringing it back to actual intimacy and union in partnership with our husbands, wives with husbands. So often people are having sex totally not in a full body experience.
No.
Just either in their mind or maybe just totally not fully in alignment with all parts of themselves. I actually think, I never read this anywhere, so I don't know, but it was calling at me when I heard it, when it says that Sarah laughed, that she was gonna have a baby, when I heard, I heard it when I was a little kid, but I'm saying when I re-heard it, recently, to me, it was that concept of fully having intimacy in full alignment where you end up in like huge laughter,
Yeah.
you know, where it's an
Tradition
orgasm
Zelda.
to the full, because to me, that's really where you could actually conceive. Of course, we could all conceive children, even just from the physical act.
Yeah.
But to me, she was granted a son, even though she was old, beyond logic, from that place of being
Divine
so
union.
connected also to herself first, to be able to be
Yes.
connected to her husband.
Yes. And we know with men, when you work with intimacy, men, they need to be connected to you. But like you said, women need to be connected to
First,
themselves to experience pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. And right. And so most people are not, I mean, yeah, like it took me so long, and still, even once I experienced it, it's still so easy to go back in time and regress and just do it from the mind.
Yeah.
Or,
And listen, there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah.
But the purpose of this practice is to get to a place where when you are in divine union, that it is coming from a place of, like I said earlier, reverence and honor and beauty and wild ecstasy.
Exactly.
Because what do you think we were doing in the base of Mikdash?
Right.
You know, and I know Rabbi Nachman is a big proponent. When you're praying, when we're worshiping God, we need to be in ecstasy. We need to bring our body into it.
Exactly.
Chabad has stuff like that also, and Sephardim have it. And I think we're bringing it back to the Jewish people en masse, is that lovemaking is the highest level of worship to God. It doesn't get higher than that.
Right.
That is what the purpose of creation, when they asked the Rebbe, was to bring heaven down to earth, man and wife.
Wow.
When we are together in holiness, when we are together and there's no more mind, we're fully in our bodies, that's when the Shekhinah rests with us. And that is the highest level of worship, but we're not looking at it as worship. Right. We're looking at it from a Christian angle. Like I said earlier, we are being infiltrated by Christianity on so many levels. Judaism looks, if you look at the quotes and the Gemara, and we actually look at sources, sexuality is the highest level of worship to God.
Wow.
And that starts with developing presence, women developing pelvic presence, developing presence at all. You know, that's what sensuality is. And that's one of the topics we cover in the course is sensuality is the quality of our presence, is bringing all of our senses into smelling a flower. You know, you can smell the flower, you could touch the flower, you could taste the flower. Let's say it's a honeysuckle, you have your kids taste it. Rose water. Right. We feel the flower, we're with the flower. You could just feel the presence of the flower. It's bringing your presence. And women nowadays, it's go, go, go. Never rest. If you rest too much, you're a slacker. We think of stories that are told to us that she rose before the sunrise, she went to bed after everyone, and she sounds like a ragamuffin. Okay, but when I think of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, I think that you see in the Gemara different areas where they had support. They weren't raising kids all on their own, you know, in these big houses, cut off with these big yards, cut off from one another. Yeah. We raised our children and in a tribe, supported by other women. We would bake bread in the communal ovens. We would wash our children and wash our clothes in the communal rivers. Yeah. And we would bleed together in the communal red tent. And I think that that's something that we need to come back to, is that we shouldn't be ragamuffins. Yeah. We shouldn't be pushing ourselves beyond exertion. You know, I think a lot of the girls that come to me who are still in high school, their teachers tell them, or their rabbi tells them, that their cycle is not a reason to skip school. It absolutely is. Right. You should be in bed resting. Your body, that's a very psychic time for you to just be in your body and be inward. And during their most vulnerable times, and this is American culture, you know, have your body back. You know, you barely take any leave after you have a child. Just go, go, go. Be efficient. Work harder. And what that's doing is creating that numbness, creating that disassociation, like that crinkly paper and the fluorescent lighting.
Making you feel weak for thinking that you should take time.
Yes.
And meanwhile, you should be the martyr and the superhero, you know?
We lost that presence. We lost what it means to be sensual. You know, everything's so hypersexualized. So if we're sensual, that means we're sexual, and then we're a slut, and then we come back to the shame. Right. But sensuality is just a quality of being, and that's the deepest feminine quality of being. Yeah. And it's the avenue of worshiping God.
There's so much shame. So much shame.
Yeah. And the first piece to that is don't judge your shame. You know, we're moving from a place of judgment to a place of perception. We needed judgment. We needed to survive for thousands of years, by judging, is this stranger going to rape and pillage?
Right.
Is this, is there going to be famine this winter? Do we have enough? Is the weather, this and that, is this disease going to outbreak? And we needed that judgment. But now we're in a place where we're moving into Mashiach consciousness. Mashiach consciousness is not so much judgment, it's more perception, witnessing, because that's, again, the feminine is we witness. What I see something in front of me, I'm just holding space for it. It just is. And that's where we need to move into. We don't need that judgment anymore. We have food, Baruch Hashem. We have organizations. If you don't have food, like we have shelter. We're not in a place where we don't have the basic needs and necessities. Yeah. But now it's our mind that needs to change. And our body, that starts with connecting into our body. And then that's going to connect the mind.
Wow. So much work to be done.
It's not work, but it just starts without that judgment.
Like the
just
reframe,
be with it.
Changing how it's so easy to just go with the default mode that we've been conditioned to for so long.
But it circles back with don't judge it.
Yeah.
Just be with it. Be with the shame. It's part of your journey. Love on it even. Thank you for getting me here. Thank you for my guilt and shame got me to where I am right now. It was part of my journey. Every one of our 4 mothers and fathers had a journey.
Yeah.
Did they judge it and say, oh, it's trauma, so it's bad, and throw it away? No. It was part of their journey. It was Hashem guiding them. And it's for us to listen and to not judge and to just perceive.
Wow. Do you want to share about the upcoming retreat?
Yes, so I'm doing a retreat September 17th. This is a womb awakening retreat. What does that mean? It means that we're going to be doing different practices and workshops to create sisterhood and to create a bond and to bring the Shekhinah into our bodies, to learn how to inhibit our bodies, to learn how to do that descent. Because again, there's only so much we can do in an hour and a half, even if we have a longer session, a 3-hour session, one-on-one. So there's only so much we can do online courses. But when we have these containers where we're able to really weave the magic of the feminine, weave the energy in the room and the space, and have this container where we're women coming together for a sole purpose of connecting into the womb, connecting into the sensual presence of life.
Wow.
That's when magic happens. And so the retreats are life-changing, and
so
they are
excited.
my soul.
I'm so excited to be joining, to be coming. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful that you made the trip out here. And for anyone that finds, where could they find you on Instagram?
You can find me on Instagram. I have a website, rachelrosendorff.com. Which I guess we could link here, there, somewhere.
We'll link
and then on Instagram, I'm the Magnetic Mother.
Amazing. For anyone that contacts you, their life will be changed. And hopefully this was amazing.
Well, thank you, Zelda.
Thank you.
Holy work you're doing. Holy work. You're a holy person.
Thank you, Rachel.
I love you. Thank you so much.
I love you. I'm so grateful.